Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're all about cava. You gave us some really great sources, and they're in Spanish too. That's always fun, right? Exploring a topic with that kind of international flavor. So we're going to take you through the world of Spanish sparkling wine, from its history to how it's made to all those different flavors it offers. And hopefully, by the end of this deep dive, you'll be a cava pro.
Oh, I think you'll be surprised by what we uncover. It's kind of a hidden gem.
Okay, well, let's uncork all this info then. So first off, for anyone who's maybe not familiar, what exactly is cava?
Cava is a sparkling wine that comes from Spain, and it's made using what's called the traditional method, just like champagne, but it has its own unique personality.
Right.
And that's thanks to the Spanish terroir, the grapes they use there.
So it's not just like a Spanish champagne. What makes cava stand apart when it comes to its origin and history?
Well, its journey is really quite fascinating. It all starts in 1872 with this winemaker, Joseph Braventos. He traveled to the Champagne region in France and brought back the traditional method to Spain.
So that's the connection to champagne then, but cava went its own way after that.
Exactly. And, it was even called champagne or zampany at first.
Yeah.
But as time went on, it really developed its own unique identity.
Hmm.
And in 1970, they established the DO Cava, which stands for Denomination de Origin. It basically guarantees that the cava you're enjoying meets specific standards.
That makes a lot of sense. So there's a group watching over cava to make sure it's authentic and good quality.
Yeah.
Seems like the Spanish are serious about their sparkling wine. You mentioned terroir before, which I know plays a huge role in the character of any wine. So where exactly does cava come from? Are there specific regions it's known for?
About 95% of cava production is centered in Penedès. It's a region in Catalonia, and you could say it's the heartland of cava. But cava is also produced in other regions,
Yeah.
like Rioja, Navarra, Extremadura, and these all add to the different types of cava you see out there.
Okay, so there's regional variation within cava, just like you find with other wine regions. Before we jump into the different regions and, what makes them unique, let's talk about the grapes themselves. What are the main grapes that go into making cava?
The classic cava trio is Macabeo, Perlata, and Zoralero. Each of these grapes brings its own unique thing to the blend.
Sounds like the start of a good party. Tell me more about these grapes.
Well, Macabeo is known for its delicate floral aromas and refreshing citrus notes. It adds a certain elegance to the cava.
So Macabeo brings the finesse. What about Parada?
Perlata is all about vibrancy, think zesty acidity and bright citrus flavors, lime, grapefruit, that kind of thing. It gives the cava a really nice crispness.
And finally, a Zorello. What does that grape contribute to the party?
Zorello is like the backbone of the blend. It provides structure and complexity with richer flavors like peach and apricot, sometimes even a hint of spice, and it ages beautifully, adding depth to the cava over time.
So we have floral elegance from Macabeo, zesty vibrancy from Perlata, and structural complexity from Zorello. That's a pretty great team. But are those the only grapes allowed in cava?
Well, that trio forms the traditional core, but there are other grapes that can be used as well. You'll sometimes see Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which are more commonly found in Champagne. It adds a bit of an international touch.
That's really interesting. It seems like cava producers are pretty open to using different grapes and exploring new things. Is there anything else that makes the cava industry particularly innovative?
One thing that stands out is their commitment to sustainability and adapting to climate change. There's a lot of research going on to find new grape varieties that can handle warmer temperatures, which could be very important for the future of cava.
That's great to hear. Okay, let's move on to how cava is actually made. You said earlier that it uses the traditional method. Can you walk us through what that means?
Sure, it's a very precise process. It involves a number of key steps. It starts with making the base wine, which involves gently pressing the grapes and temperature-controlled fermentation.
So it starts off like any other still wine. When do those famous bubbles get added?
The magic happens during the second fermentation, and this happens right inside the bottle. This is where the carbon dioxide is created, which gives us those lovely bubbles we associate with sparkling wine.
So it's bottled up during the second fermentation, and that traps the bubbles. What happens next?
After that second fermentation, the cava ages on what are called lees. Those are the leftover yeast cells from the fermentation process, and they play a big part in giving cava its complexity and character.
Lees. Okay. I haven't heard that term before. How do they affect the final flavor of the cava?
They add those, like toasty, nutty, even bread-like aromas and flavors, which you often find in cava, especially in those that have been aged for longer.
So the lees add a whole other layer to the cava, but how do they get those lees out of the bottle after they've done their job?
That's where riddling comes in. It's a traditional technique where the bottles are gradually tilted and turned over time, and that moves the lees towards the neck of the bottle. Then there's disgorgement. They freeze the neck of the bottle, trapping the lees, and then the bottle is opened. And the frozen plug of lees basically shoots out.
Wow, that sounds like a really delicate process. So the leaves are removed, and you're left with those nice clear bubbles. What's the final step in the process?
The last step is dosage. A small amount of wine and sugar is added to the bottle, and this determines the sweetness level of the cava. It also balances out the acidity and rounds out the flavor profile.
Dosage, okay, that makes sense. I've always seen terms on cava labels like brut and demi-sec. Does that have something to do with the sugar that's added during dosage?
Exactly. The sweetness level in cava is indicated by terms like brut nature, extra brut, brutin, extra dry, sec, demi-sec, and dulce. Brut nature is the driest style, while dulce is the sweetest.
So there's like a whole range of sweetness you can find in cava, something for everyone. Earlier, we talked about how different regions produce different styles of cava. I'd love to dig into that a bit more. What are some of the things that make cava from each region stand out?
Each region really does bring its own unique character to the table, just like the different grapes do. So let's start with Penedès, since that's where most cava comes from. Cavas from Penedès are known for being light, fresh, and having vibrant citrus flavors. They're perfect with tapas.
Makes sense, given that it's right there in the Mediterranean. I bet they're super refreshing. What about Rioja? I know that region is known for its big red wines. Do they produce a different style of cava?
You might be surprised, but Rioja does make some excellent cavas. They have their own personality, though. They tend to be a bit more full-bodied and complex, and they often showcase ripe fruit and spicy notes.
Oh, interesting. So you get those Rioja characteristics even in their sparkling wines. What about Navarra? That's another region with a really strong winemaking tradition.
Cavas from Navarra tend to be fresher, more elegant, often with a kind of subtle herbal complexity. They're great with seafood, which makes sense considering how close Navarra is to the coast.
That sounds delicious. And lastly, we have Extremadura. We haven't talked about that region much.
Extremadura is where things get a bit more intense. The cavas from this region are usually full-bodied and powerful, with ripe fruit flavors and often a noticeable minerality. That comes from the unique soil in the region.
Wow, so there's truly a cava for everyone. From light and refreshing to rich and complex, each region really offers something special. This has been an amazing journey through the world of cava so far. I already feel like I know so much more, and I'm excited to try all these different styles. What can we look forward to in part 2 of our deep dive?
In part 2, we're going to shift our focus to the producers themselves, both the big names and the smaller artisanal producers. We'll talk about the trends, the innovations, and the challenges that are shaping the future of cava.
Sounds great. We'll be back after a short break to continue our cava adventure. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our cava exploration. So in part 1, we covered like a lot of ground, from the history of cava to how it gets those amazing bubbles. Now, I want to know more about like the people behind the wine. What can you tell us about the actual cava producers, the ones shaping the industry today?
Well, there's a huge variety of cava producers out there. You have the kind of big established houses, and then you have this new wave of artisanal producers. It's a really exciting time for cava right now with so much innovation and like a real focus on quality.
You mentioned artisanal producers. What makes them different in the world of cava?
They're often smaller family-run operations, and they prioritize, limited production. They're very connected to their vineyards, and they're really pushing the boundaries of what cava can be, experimenting with different blends, aging the wines longer, and many are even incorporating organic and biodynamic farming practices.
Biodynamic farming, can you explain what that means? It's a way of looking at the vineyard as a whole ecosystem, like self-sustaining. They go beyond just organic farming, incorporating practices like using natural compost preparations and working with the lunar calendar. It's all about creating this harmony between the vines, the soil, and the environment.
It sounds like a very hands-on and philosophical approach to winemaking.
Right. It's pretty cool. And the producers who use these biodynamic methods, they often believe that it produces wines that are more expressive of the place they come from, wines with more depth and complexity. They're working with nature, to produce wines that are unique.
I love that idea of really crafting a wine that shows where it's from. Are there any specific producers who really exemplify this approach to making cava?
Yeah, for sure. One example is Ricaredo. They're a producer that's super committed to organic and biodynamic practices. They have so much respect for their vineyards. And they use these really natural methods to, improve biodiversity and soil health. Their cavas are known for being like very pure and elegant, and they have this distinct minerality that reflects their terroir.
So they really do like embody that idea of, a wine with a sense of place. Are there any other artisanal producers that you think our listeners should check out?
Definitely. Gramone is another great one. They're family owned and they have this long history of making, really high quality cava. And they're known for aging their cavas for a really long time. Some of them spend like up to a decade on the lees.
A decade, wow, that's a serious commitment to the aging process. How does aging a cava for that long change the flavor?
It creates these incredibly complex and rich flavors. You often get aromas of toasted bread, honey, dried fruits, and that delicate nutty character that comes from all those years spent on the lees.
Sounds like a really special wine. So we've talked about these smaller producers who are, pushing the boundaries. But what about the bigger cava houses? Are they keeping up with these trends?
Absolutely. A lot of the larger houses are also like changing with the times. They see that consumers are really interested in quality, sustainability, and, wines with a story. So many of them are making organic cavas now, and they're experimenting with single vineyard bottlings. And they're even focusing on specific subregions, all to show off those unique terroirs within cava.
So even the big players are realizing that terroir matters. Can you give an example of a larger cava house that's doing this really well?
Claude O'Neill is a great example. They're one of the most established cava producers with a history going back to the 16th century, and they've been really influential in shaping the whole cava industry. But they're also leading the way in innovation. They have a whole line of organic cavas, and they're putting a lot of resources into research, looking at how to adapt to climate change and ensure the long-term sustainability of their vineyards.
That's great to hear. It's really encouraging to see these producers, big and small, embracing these ideas. Okay, but with all this positive stuff happening, are there any challenges facing the cava industry?
Yeah, there are always challenges. One of the biggest is competition from other sparkling wines around the world. Prosecco especially has become really popular, and it often attracts people because it's cheaper.
Yeah, I feel like Prosecco is everywhere these days. How does cava stand out in that kind of market?
Cava offers something unique. Remember, it's made using that traditional method, just like champagne. So you get finer bubbles, more complexity, and while it might not be as famous as champagne, it offers incredible value for the money.
So it's about educating people about what makes cava special. Those fine bubbles, the complexity from the aging, the variety, and of course the value.
Exactly. And it's not just about competition from other wines either. Climate change is a big concern for all wine regions, and Cava is no exception. Rising temperatures, unpredictable weather, these things can affect how the grapes ripen, and that impacts the quality of the wine.
So what are cava producers doing to address these challenges?
They're trying a lot of different things. Experimenting with grape varieties that can handle drought conditions, using techniques to conserve water, exploring new ways to grow the grapes. They're constantly innovating and adapting to ensure the future of cava production.
Wow. It's really inspiring to see how these producers are taking on these challenges and working to preserve the tradition of cava while also looking ahead. I feel like we've learned so much in this part of our deep dive, from those small artisanal producers to those larger cava houses and the challenges they face. So what's next? What can we expect in part three?
In part three, we're going to take all of this information and make it practical for you. We'll give you tips on how to choose a cava, how to serve it, basically how to explore the world of cava and find your own favorites.
That sounds like the perfect way to finish our deep dive into cava. Let's take a quick break, then come back and learn how to enjoy this delicious sparkling wine.
All right, we're back, ready to put all this cava knowledge to good use. We've talked about everything, the history, the grapes, how it's made. We even, learned about some of the people behind those amazing cavas. Yeah. But now it's time for the best part, right?
Yeah.
Actually figuring out how to choose a cava that we'll love.
I like that. We've got this, treasure map, and it leads to a cellar full of all these delicious cavas just waiting for us. But it doesn't have to be overwhelming, to actually go out and pick a bottle. Let's talk about some practical tips for how to choose a cava and, of course, how to enjoy it.
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to be a cava expert. Where do we start?
Well, the first thing to think about is the occasion. Are you just looking for an everyday cava to drink with dinner, or is it for a special occasion, to celebrate something? Okay, so let's say it's a weeknight and I'm making dinner. Something simple like pasta with some herbs and lemon. What kind of cava would go well with that?
In that case, I'd say a Cava Brut would be a great choice. It's the most versatile style, nice and crisp with that refreshing citrus flavor that'll go really well with your pasta.
So Brut is the good all-rounder then. But what if I'm looking for something a bit, more special, like for a weekend brunch or something?
Hmm. If you want to step it up a notch, and try a Cava Reserva. They have a bit more complexity. Those toasty, nutty notes from the aging process, they add a nice depth of flavor.
Okay, Reserva. Got it. And if I'm like really trying to impress, like anniversary dinner, that kind of thing.
Then you definitely want to go for a Cava Grand Reserva. Or even a Cava de Parache Calificado. These are like the top tier of Cavas.
Mm.
They're made with such attention to detail, and they're aged for a long time. They're really elegant, complex. Honestly, they can rival some of the best champagnes out there.
Wow. Okay. So I'm getting a better idea now of the different types of cava. But I still feel a bit intimidated, when I see those huge wine lists at restaurants, all those different producers. Any advice on how to actually read a cava label and make a good choice?
Definitely. One thing that helps is looking for those terms we've been talking about, like the sweetness levels, from brut nature to dolce. Pick a sweetness that you like. You can also look for the aging terms like Reserva or Gran Reserva. That'll give you an idea of how complex the cava is.
So those keywords on the label can help me narrow it down. What about the producer? Should I stick with the brands I know, or are there smaller producers worth trying?
Oh, definitely try branching out. Some of the most interesting cavas are coming from those smaller artisanal producers. They're the ones who are really like experimenting and trying new things. Remember Ricaredo and Gramona? They make some really exceptional cavas. And a lot of good wine shops have staff who can help you too. They can make recommendations or point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Okay, so I've picked out my cava, I brought it home, ready to drink it. How should I serve it, to make sure I'm getting the most out of it?
The ideal temperature for cava is between 43 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mm.
So pop it in the fridge for a couple of hours before you want to drink it. And as for the glass, skip those wide, shallow coupes. Those are better for cocktails. You want a tall, slender flute or a tulip-shaped glass.
Yeah.
That'll keep those bubbles nice and lively and concentrate the aromas.
So the glass actually makes a difference. Got to keep those bubbles happy.
For sure. And don't forget to, really appreciate the cava before you even take a sip. Look at the color, swirl it around a bit in the glass to release those aromas. Take a good sniff.
Mm.
It's amazing how much you can pick up just from the smell.
That's a great point, Slow down and use all your senses. It's not just about the taste, it's about the whole experience. Before we wrap up, any last words of wisdom for our listeners who are, just starting their kava journey?
Be curious and have fun. Try different styles, experiment with pairings, figure out what you like. The world of kava is full of amazing discoveries. There's really something for everyone.
I love that. Well, this has been an incredible journey exploring the world of Cava, from where it all began to the amazing people who are making these fantastic wines. And now it's time for our listeners to go out and discover the magic of Cava for themselves.
Cheers to that.
Cheers! And until next time, happy deep diving.